Welcome to the ROTC Scholarship Podcast, hosted by former Army ROTC Professor of Military Science, Lieutenant Colonel retired Rob Kirkland. In these episodes, we explore how to best prepare yourself to obtain one of these valuable scholarships for those applicants who wish to attend a college or university and become officers in the military. The application process can be complex and confusing. This podcast works to make it more understandable. And now, the ROTC Scholarship Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rob Kirkland, and I am joined with
Captain Trish Dock, and it's great to be here with you guys today. Excited to talk about what it takes to be successful, to get into a service academy and an ROTC program when you're in 9th and 10th grade. So how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. And this is a subject that we've wanted to discuss for some time, because I think that, what we've, at least in the past, when we've discussed this, all of our previous podcasts, sometimes they're directed at like 11th or 12th graders, and particularly, people who are kind of in their last year to year and a half of getting ready for either an ROTC scholarship or a service academy appointment. And, but really, I think the most successful candidates that we have dealt with are ones that have, had this kind of preparation much, much earlier, because they've been able, when they have this idea of earlier in their high school career, they can then do the proper things to prepare themselves for what the academies are and ROTC programs are expecting of them. And so the earlier start that you get, I think the more competitive you're going to be. And so today we're going to really break it down into 4 categories, which would be academics, athletics, leadership, and character. And we have a blog post on our sites that kind of talk about break down kind of all 4 of these areas. And we're certainly today not going to cover every single thing that you need to be concerned about, because that would just be an exhaustive list. But we're just going to highlight what we probably think are the major things you should be thinking about, as a 9th and 10th grader. And this is not to preclude people in 7th or 8th grade, looking at this also. We just put 9th and 10th as, because it's high school and because, you can affect it immediately. But the earlier you start, I think, the better off you are. And I was going to ask you, Trish, when did you start thinking about the Air Force Academy and start kind of fashioning your resume? Was it ideal, not so ideal? What do you wish you had done differently if it wasn't ideal? I don't know, but what?
It was absolutely not ideal, only because I was in the Midwest. I was not exposed to the military in Ohio, didn't really know anything about it. I had a friend approach me and say he was interested in going to the Air Force Academy my junior year, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of it. I did have some interest in flying, and so I was looking at flight programs and decided that I might as well serve my country too at the same time. And the more I learned about it, just like a lot of students today, find a lot of students don't know about the service academies until late in the game. What is it? About 85% don't come from military background that go to service academies. So whether or not you find about the service academies in 9th or 10th grade, that's going to give you an advantage because it's going to set you up. But if you're like me and I didn't know about the service academies and the Air Force Academy specifically until 11th grade, I had a very late start, and I was lucky because I had very supportive adults in my life that could help me get there. My coaches, my guidance counselor, my parents were all very supportive of me. But the thing that set me up was that I had started pursuing excellence from middle school. But as soon as I got into high school, I just kept that going. And that's the general theme of what we want to talk about today, is really to be successful for a service academy or ROTC scholarship. You have to act like you want to succeed in life, and your opportunities are endless. You don't want to close anything off. And that starts in 9th and 10th grade, because even if you don't end up going to a service academy or an ROTC program, whatever you end up doing, the habits that you start forming early in high school will establish success and help you achieve excellence if you decide to go be a car mechanic even. So really what we're talking about today is going to help you succeed in life no matter what you decide to do, but especially it's critical for service academy and for ROTC scholarships.
Right. No, that's good. I think, that I agree with everything you're saying there. And really, I mean, this preparation is somewhat the same as getting ready for a good college and university. The academics, the leadership, and things like that. I would say for me, compared to you, I'd say I was in Civil Air Patrol in middle school in seventh grade or so. And I knew I wanted to do this pretty early.
Traitor, you're a traitor. You
Yeah.
you went to Army.
Yeah, I know. I did Civil Air Patrol. I went to the Army. Isn't that crazy? But yeah, but when I got to start early in when I realized what I realized was that I needed athletics. I realized I had the academics. I was getting ready for there. I was doing leadership in Civil Air Patrol and other things. The character piece we'll talk about later was sort of taken care of by Civil Air Patrol to a certain extent. But I was in good physical shape, but I hadn't done any sports, and so I realized pretty early that I needed to get sports on my resume, and so that's what spurred me to join a sport in high school, was because of
And so what
that.
did you join, sir?
I joined track and cross country, mainly because I probably couldn't make the team, in baseball or in football or some skill sport, because even though I think I was a fairly good, well-rounded athlete, I wasn't really, able probably to make the varsity team. Our high school was a fairly competitive high school.
That's
So
something really interesting that I'd like to dive into a little bit more once you talk about the rest of your profile.
yeah, definitely. And we can certainly talk about that in the athletics section too. So I guess the point that I'm making here is that you can take a look, the earlier you get to take a look at these things and see where you're lacking or see where you can improve, the more runway you'll have in order to be able to improve, so that by the time you're a senior and the academies and ROTC programs are looking at you, you'll have your top notch resume and credentials. I mean, it's so difficult when we talk to candidates who are finishing up their junior year and they just don't have something. They don't have an athletic. They haven't done a lot of leadership. Maybe their SAT scores are low and they haven't done anything to prepare ahead of time. It's just really tough to overcome that late in the ball game. And so the further you can back up and the further you can see what the requirements are and what they're looking for, I think the better prepared you're going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's tackle the first one here, and we'll talk about academics. So with academics, I kind of break that down into classes, meaning the class to get ready for the ROTC or the academies, and SAT and ACT. So which one do you want to tackle?
Let's talk about classes first.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that really when you get to high school where you're at, taking a look at the minimum requirements for whatever you're trying to achieve, service academies, ROTC, and realizing that all the programs, they really want a lot of STEM focus. So getting to the minimum of being in pre-calculus your senior year is the bare minimum, and then kind of mapping that backwards. So what do you have to do to get to, at a minimum, pre-calculus, best case calculus? Maybe it's summer school. Maybe after your freshman year, you have to get into summer school or take tutoring to get caught up in some of these subjects. And it's not just math, it's the sciences too. So really planning that out, thinking ahead, thinking about, okay, this is something I really struggle with. Maybe I'm just terrible at biology and I need to make sure that I am successful in this class. So I need to do whatever it takes. I think that for a lot of students, when you see subpar grades, a lot of times they're just not turning their homework in on time. So, and that's procrastination a lot of time, or forgetfulness. And so organization plays a huge role in that as well. Because if you're organized, you would know that your homework's due tomorrow. and you would turn it in on time. And turning your homework in on time makes a huge difference in your grades.
Right. And that ninth grade is when most of the grade for almost all of the service academies and ROTCs, ninth grade is the kind of the start year for the GPA. Of course, that's the same as a college or university. Is they evaluate you in the same way. So yeah, I mean, I love the summer school thing to kind of get caught up. Realizing that that your GPA starts early.
Mm-hmm.
You look at when you look at the classes at the the academies, and I think probably when we say the academies, we don't necessarily have to say ROTC all the time, because if you're prepared for the academies, you're going to be prepared for the ROTC. So we can
Exactly.
probably stick to some of these with ROTC. I mean, with the service academies, and mention ROTC on occasion. But if you take a look at what the freshman year at an academy is, it's English, it's history / social science, it's chemistry, physics, college chemistry or physics, and math, calculus based math. And so all of those are ones that you should be strong in high school, and show the academy that you can succeed in those and exceed in those well. And what do you think we mean by well in as far as grades go?
I'd say A's if possible. B's are acceptable every once in a while. A C, and I'm going to start
Yeah.
questioning things.
Yeah, we
A
have
D is
noticed.
absolutely
Yeah,
unacceptable.
we've noticed that with C's, don't we? That C, if you get a C in a course, it seems to be, from our experience, they really hone in on that. If they want to know why. So you may want to look at grade replacement. You may want to look at taking a course over the summer to replace that grade to get that. I don't know what high schools do these certain things, but I think they would do grade replacement if you could figure out a way to do that in your high school.
Especially if, C's are a little bit more acceptable freshman year. The further you go along, the stronger you want your performance to be, because you're trying to show the academies that, okay, I'm maturing, I'm doing better, I'm figuring things out, and I'm going to be successful at the academy. But if you can get those habits down when you're a freshman or sophomore in high school, it's just really going to take you through all the way to senior year until you're applying to academies.
Right. And then some other courses, that you probably want to look at, certainly a keyboarding course, computer science, maybe economics, psychology, what other areas?
Language,
What's that?
a language.
Oh, yes, of course. That's even more important. I mean, yeah, having a foreign language, because that's going to be a requirement, either 2 or 3 semesters at the academy. So yeah, I mean, that's certainly even more important than some of the ones that I mentioned. And so yeah, you put all those together, and what you're doing is you're putting together a resume very quickly for the academies to look at. Honors courses, obviously, trying to do your best with honors courses. AP courses, certainly show kind of that rigor, but that needs to be balanced, I think, and I think you'll reinforce this with me with kind of what grades you can realistically get in these courses too, because
Absolutely.
I don't think, at least from what I've seen, that they're not going to penalize you if you just took a regular course versus an honors course for something. They're going to look at that grade more than perhaps just that it was honors English versus regular English. So you've got to balance those two. And if I had to kind of pick between the two, I would probably go with just a regular course with an A rather than an honors course with a B.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, maybe for AP considerations and your GPA, just if the AP class is offered, since that is factored into admissions. However, a lot of these classes have requirements for getting into the honors and getting into the APs. You have to have an A or a B in the prerequisites to get in. So that you can't just jump into these classes. It's something that has to be planned.
Right. And, the academies are not mind readers, so they're not going to know that, what the difference between honors 2 or honors 1 or no honors things is. So you just got to realize that it's going to, your transcript is going to be scrutinized, but not maybe to the degree where they may be able to make those determinations between,
A fine-tooth
gradations
comb.
of honors
Mhm.
or non-honors courses. So let grades be your guide. In
That's
my opinion.
A great prep. What about SAT, ACT prep, sir?
Yeah. Well, my daughter went to one of these prep schools, kind of private prep schools, and she had classmates who would start their SAT and ACT prep in the 6th grade, if you can believe it. So they would drill SAT from the 6th grade. Now, I think that's a bit extreme, but I think that the sooner that you can get exposed to the SAT and ACT, and through taking it multiple times and getting more used to it, I think the better off that you're going to be when by the time you get to your senior year. We've seen a lot of cases where a person going into their senior year doesn't have the SAT scores that they're hoping to get for the academies or ACTs, and we're talking about 1,400, over 1,400, with preferably well over 700 on math, or a 32 ACT. And those don't come without practice, but you're a heck of a lot better if you're going into your senior year with those scores rather than trying to go through the fall of your senior year trying to get those scores up, for a number of reasons. But you want to be competitive right away, because if you have those types of scores by the time you're entering your senior year, the chances of getting, like, say, a letter of assurance from one of the service academies is higher. So my recommendation is to start your preparation early. The other thing that comes to my mind is that, if you're into, say, taking calculus in the 11th grade or calculus AB in the 11th grade, God, I was in pre-calculus in 12th grade. So I guess, kids these days are much smarter than I was when I was their age. But in any event, if you're taking calculus in the 11th grade, you've left, algebra and geometry and a little bit of trigonometry, you've left that back a few years ago. And so I don't necessarily know if you're doing calculus AB in the 12th grade, if you're optimized for doing well on that SAT or ACT. So, because you got to shift gears, you got to, go back to some of the things you learned earlier to do well in the SAT, ACT. Well, meanwhile, you're, getting hammered in your courses for, trying to find a volume of a cylinder, whatever, the calculus folks do, in those years. So I guess, the earlier you can start, the better. But what do you think about that? And what do you think about how early someone should, prepare for the SAT, ACT?
Well, a lot of students take the PSAT their sophomore year, so that's kind of built in because they're taking it in school now. But I've talked with some parents that are very hesitant to go down that path just because their student hasn't finished Algebra 2 yet. And my thought is, get them exposed as early as possible, because they're going to see these questions on the SAT, and then when they go through Algebra 2, they'll be like, oh, this is exactly the material that is on the SAT, and it'll make sense. And you can start testing, and like you said, the sooner that you can get those scores, the better. And although we talk about working with seniors and applying to the academies and ROTC Scholarship senior year, realistically, my goal for you is our goal for you is to have the score that you want by the summer of your rising senior year. So you're a junior, it's April, it's May, it's June, and you have the score you want. That's optimal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that will allow kind of those things that I mentioned earlier, the letters of assurance, that are usually given out in the August, September timeframe. And you're just not going to get that. The academies are not going to give you a letter of assurance with a suboptimal SAT or ACT score. It's just not going to happen. 100% of the time, it's not going to happen, unless maybe you're an athlete. Maybe, that they may give you that letter of assurance if you're an athlete. But just, standard Joe or Jane, they're not going to give you a letter of assurance with a suboptimal SAT score. So whatever works for you, I think earlier the better. And remember, the score is super scored. Sometimes the question is asked, well, what would the academy think of me taking it multiple times? And my answer is that they would see you as a person who has a lot of resilience, and a person who really wants this. So I don't think there's any downside to taking this test as many times as you'd like.
Test early, test often.
Exactly. So good. So those are the two things I think with academics. Did I miss anything that, I know SAT and classes are and of course grades I think are the most important. So let's talk about athletics and physical fitness.
That's
Thoughts?
a thoughts. So many
We
thoughts.
all
So many.
have thoughts about it.
Well, like you said, when you were in high school, sir, you ended up running track and cross country because you didn't feel like you could join a super competitive team and compete at the varsity level. That's a really important thought because depending on your school district and where you are right now, if you're a freshman or a sophomore in high school, you might not be able to join one of those more traditional teams where it's a team sport, not necessarily an individual sport. So our advice to you is if you are not yet in high school, if you're listening to this and you're in middle school, pick a sport and specialize in it. So that way, when you get to high school, you can be competitive at least enough to get on the freshman team or the JV team and work your way up through the years to varsity. Because it's not about being on varsity your freshman year. It's about being on varsity, at least lettering once. But that is such a critical element, and just highlighting how critical it is that you have a varsity letter. It's something 85% of students or something around those lines who get into service academies, who win scholarships, have at least one varsity letter. And a lot of those folks have multiple varsity letters, and maybe they lettered multiple times in the same sport or multiple times in different sports. So just showing that ability to excel in the field or wherever you compete is really critical for the academies and ROTC programs to think that you're going to be successful in their program, because fitness is a huge part of the military.
Yep, and scoping out what's maybe the competitive landscape of your high school and seeing maybe where you can take your shot at. Like my high school, we were state bowling champions for a number of years. So we were like Colony Central High School. We were legends in bowling. So I mean, I was a pretty good bowler, but to make the bowling team was real tough. So that would be like an example of like a sport where you probably wouldn't want to compete. Now, I don't necessarily recommend bowling as a sport to concentrate on in high school. Doesn't have the reputation of being overly athletic. Although I think some professional bowlers might beg to differ with us on that one. Maybe Weber or some of those guys. But look at a sport that you can make. Like for example, my high school, the boys cross country and track team was sort of in not super competitive. So I realized, and it doesn't take a lot of skill to run, pretty much you learn that when you're about 3 years old. So,
Mhm.
but our baseball team was outstanding. So I just knew I wasn't going to, make that team. So it's just kind of checking it out and also seeing what you like, and what interests you and things like that. But getting that start early and picking your spots, I think is
Yeah, and
very important.
there's more and more sports today too to get involved in. Just working with different clients, hearing about the Raiders team for the first time as an example, where it's kind of like a CrossFit team where you're going out and you're doing challenges and obstacles. Just depending on the sports at your high school, it's going to be different. And the academies are seeing a lot of these different sports now. And I think going back to what you're saying is thinking about, okay, does this sport have athleticism involved in it? Or is it more of a singular skill that you gain, like
Right.
bowling?
Yeah, bowling where you roll the ball, then you eat a piece of pizza in between each roll of the ball. Not beer until after become 21 years old, of course. So just put your
So, sir, what if you're a sophomore and you just feel like you're either in a place where there are no sports, or there's just really no opportunities for you to get involved, but you really want to go in the military as an officer? What would you tell that person?
Yeah, I would say just try to find a sport in your community that you can become good at outside of your high school. Like you take a look, for example, at gymnastics. Oftentimes, gymnastics is uh, something you do outside of school. That they don't have gymnastics teams in your high school. Maybe there's no swim team in your high school, but there's a local pool where they have like a community swim team that you can compete in and do well in and get times that are comparable to being a high school athlete. maybe there's like martial arts. Maybe you might, look at, becoming heavily involved in that. So I think there is those options. I mean, if you are, uh, you know, curious enough. For example, racket sports like tennis, maybe squash or things like that are actually club sports at the academy. Tennis is a varsity sport, but sometimes that you might not have that, but your local community has a very competitive tennis, and you can work your way up the USTA, U.S. Tennis Association rankings, and be comparable to what you would do in a high school. So I think there's various ways that you can do that. I think if you're clever enough and think about it hard enough.
And then I think one of the next questions that leads into our next category is, why is there such an emphasis on sports, and how does that relate to leadership?
Yeah, exactly right. That's a great lead in. But before we do that, I just want to mention one more thing about the athletics is that, physical fitness goes into that too. But, sometimes some of this physical fitness is one dimensional. So like if you're a cross country runner, male or woman, male or female cross country runner, you got to remember that the test is also going to test your upper body strength as well as your abdominal strength. So, you should be continuing to work your upper body strength and your abdominal strength even while you're doing your sport. So don't become one dimensional there. Make sure you're a well-rounded person who's working out on their own and making sure that you're preparing for the tests that the academies and ROTCs are going to be giving you. But yeah, so let me go into the leadership, which is the third category here. And so the third category of leadership, when we talk about athletics, is by the time you're a senior, what you're hoping to do is you're hoping to become captain of the team or a co-captain of a team. And this shows your leadership. This shows that that your peers and coaches, hopefully your peers, preferably over your coaches, but they see you as a leader. They see you as somebody who, has set the example for the team, as a person that is, athletically fit and is a great contributor. So the captains of the teams show that they put in the work and have the respect. And so that kind of goes, I think that kind of shows, how you can get like a 2-for-1 there. You get that, that physical fitness, athletics, and then you get the leadership points also.
Really, really good point. And I think it's important to highlight that it takes a certain type of commitment and perseverance to become a captain. And a lot of times it is respect from your peers. And even if your coaches are choosing who the captain's going to be, it's usually because they have really good respect and rapport with their teammates, with their peers, with their subordinates, and with the, if you're a junior and you're going to be chosen to be team captain potentially next year, how do you get along with the seniors right now? Because that all plays into it. So it's putting in the time and the effort when you're a freshman and when you're a sophomore to show that you're committed to the team and that you would make a future good team captain.
Right. And so that's really almost the same thing as what you would do with other parts of leadership too, is kind of setting the example, and we've talked about this in the previous podcasts, and particularly the last podcast we did is anything that can show that your peers respect you in some way, shape, or form, or they've elected you, school senate, president, vice president, secretary, things like that you're effectively leading your peers, or even better, your peers have elected you as this particular leader, shows, I think, that you are a leader. And that's really what the academies and ROTC are looking for, is the vote from your peers that you are a leader. Because when you go to the academies and ROTC, you're going to be leading your peers. And so, you can do that in school. You can do that outside of school. I mean, it's not, there's plenty of opportunities in your school, from yearbook to, to student senate, to, class president, vice president, to all the different clubs that you can run. And you can even make your own club in high school. So it's not like you can make, like, we've had candidates make their own clubs, and have made themselves a president of their own club. Now, I don't I think that's a good thing. As long as it's something that they're interested in and that's what they want to do. And then of course there's outside of school too. You can find a myriad of opportunities. I mean, this world or your community is looking for leaders, looking for people to take responsibility and to motivate others in order to accomplish a mission or goal. And if you just kind of open your eyes and look around, you can see all sorts of things that could use a good leader to kind of accomplish something.
One of the examples that I like to use for myself when and kind of talking about how I was just lucky enough to be in the right position with my resume and extracurriculars in high school to take junior year and still get into Air Force. I was a member of the Student Leadership Council at the local YMCA, where we would get together and we would talk about how to make positive impacts with kids in the community. And then I also ran a few book drives where during teacher conference nights, parent teacher conference nights at elementary schools, we would go to and we would volunteer to read books to the kids while their parents were in there if they didn't have sitters or anything like that. So that's just because I liked helping out little kids, and that's what I wanted to do in high school. So it's really good to just pick what you're interested in and go with it and get involved. And there might not be it might not drop in front of you, but you might see the opportunity and just go for it when it's something that you're interested in, but you also might have to make it happen yourself.
Right. Yeah. So you can, have it because of it's an interest like you, or you develop it on your own. But there's just so much out there. You just have to let your mind think about it, I sometimes recommend that candidates go and do a food drive or do clean up your local community. I mean, you look at the road in your local community and it's got garbage all over it. What are you doing about it? So
That's a good point. Is it takes initiative. That's what they're looking for. Is did you have the initiative to go out and make the world a better place in some way, shape, or form?
right, exactly. And so the final part, I think, of the leadership that you cover in your article that I think is important is this kind of military propensity that I think is, oftentimes overlooked until much later. Like, I'll sometimes recommend when I see a junior or a senior, well, maybe join Civil Air Patrol just to get some interest in Civil Air Patrol. Well, the problem with like things like Civil Air Patrol or Young Marines or Sea Cadets is that oftentimes the candidates or cadets or midshipmen that by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're senior people in the organization, in these cadet organizations. And sometimes even, if you got fast moving people, even, maybe ninth or 10th graders are now like senior people in these organizations. So if you're a senior going and you go to say Civil Air Patrol, you're going to be, underneath or, subordinate to a ninth grader or a 10th grader. And it can be kind of like a blow to, some of these individuals. And sometimes it just get turned off by these military, kind of auxiliaries or kind of high school organizations. So I think it's important to get an early start with these, whether it's junior ROTC in your high school, Civil Air Patrol, Young Marines, etc. Get going in ninth or 10th grade so that by the time you're a junior or senior, you've made the ranks. If you're in Civil Air Patrol, you've made Mitchell or higher Earhart Award or something like that. The second thing that's really interesting about the military propensity is that how much it is important to the academies and ROTCs. And, I take Navy ROTC for an example, and I've heard, several people that are in the know with Navy ROTC that, that if you're in like high school and you have a Navy Junior ROTC program in your high school and you're not a member of Navy Junior ROTC, they have significant concerns about you and what your motivation is for being in the Navy. But they actually give additional points and additional consideration for those who actually have participation in these organizations. So I think it's worth a very serious look if you are particularly in ninth or 10th grade or even earlier, 7th or 8th grade, to look at one of these organizations because it just counts for so much.
And it's also going to a service academy, going through to ROTC. You're talking a minimum of 8 to 9 years of your life. And joining one of those organizations can help you figure out, is this really what I want? Especially if you don't come from a military family and you have no military background. So it's a really good opportunity to not only boost your overall profile, but to just give you a better sense of understanding what you're committing to, because it is a huge commitment.
Yeah, and it's only about 1 day a week are these meetings. So usually in the evening after school. So it's not like, you're going to be having to go 5 days a week. So it does give you that kind of taste of the military, and kind of gives you an idea of whether or not this is something that you want to do. I completely agree. So it's something you should definitely, consider as part of your kind of extracurricular kit bag, as we might say. So good. So the final area is character. And so, what do we mean by that? And why is this? Why do we include this in the four, in kind of the big four here?
Well, I think you could be an excellent scholar and an athlete, and maybe not have the best leadership skills or the best character. I think a lot of times character and leadership go hand in hand. But underneath it all, underneath these three pillars that we've talked about, character is everywhere. So to be, to be good at your academics, your athletics, and to be a leader, you have to be a person who does the right thing, even when no one's looking. And I think if you strip away everything else, it's, do you make the right decisions? Do you have a moral compass? And are you doing that always, no matter what?
Right. It's like the Air Force, integrity first. Which is, that's shows you what the Air Force values, and and are you a selfless person? A selfless leader. You can be the captain of your team and maybe be the president of your class, but you may be a selfish person. I mean, do you kind of embody these values that we're looking for in the military? And I know that, I've talked about this in a separate podcast, about, kind of the values that we embody, that we're looking for people to embody, this kind of, selfless servant. What do you bring to the military, and and why are you doing what you're doing? In other words, are you going into the military? Are you going into the service academy so that you can have the prestige of graduating from a service
Mm-hmm.
academy?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going into a service academy in order to be able to lead America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines? And I think that it's a little bit different of an emphasis than what maybe a college and university is looking for in admissions. College and university is looking for, what have you done, right? In a lot of ways, what kind of scholar, athlete, leader, more like scholar and leader is more kind of what colleges are looking for. Maybe some athletics too, but they're looking for what are your base accomplishments. Whereas I think, for the military, they're looking for that kind of the values proposition that I talked about. And I think that one of the big errors that people make, that oftentimes I know you and I and Colonel Reynolds oftentimes need to correct in a person when we work with them, on their interview prep and other things, is to shift their thinking. Because their thinking tends to be, hey, this is what I've done, and because I've done this, you need to select me. Whereas I think coming at it coming from a viewpoint of, of a value set of what the military considers to be important, is going to make a better impression.
If you're in ninth and 10th grade right now, you have such a potential to take this kind of wisdom that we're giving you and apply it throughout the rest of your high school career, to think about your classmates and how you're helping your classmates, what you're doing for them, your classmates, your teammates, anyone that's in your life. Because I think that's something that's not really discussed much with students, is the fact that, yes, you're going to be an officer, but what does that actually look like? And really, you're taking care of your enlisted folks. That's your job. Or if you're a senior officer, to take care of your junior officers and their enlisted folks. And just looking at that big picture, what are you doing now to take care of people? Are you going to be willing to stay late to write that to help that person who works for you, or right now is your peer in high school? Are you willing to take the extra effort to go out of the way to help one of your classmates if they're failing in your class? Are you going to help them to tutor them through the class is just an example. But it's examples like that that show that when the time comes when you are on active duty, you are going to be willing to help your people.
Right, exactly. And, how you work with your teammates and, how you show this kind of teamwork. I know that I sometimes work with candidates, and I know that that's just not, but when they come across initially, when they look like a leader, it's like, I'm the leader and I was just leading around a bunch of flunkies, whereas, what you're trying to do, and I know they don't mean it that way, but it comes across that way, that I was a leader and everyone else was just kind of a sideshow.
Incompetent.
Right. Incompetent or weren't as, or they just, if I wasn't there, everything would have fallen apart. So, I think that, by kind of being humble and realizing that nothing ever gets accomplished by yourself, you accomplish it as a team. Nothing ever happens in the military as an individual person. It always happens as a member of a team. Like, when you look at Top Gun, you want to be Iceman. You don't want to be Maverick, right? Because, Iceman never leaves their wingman versus, Maverick. You never knew what Maverick was going to do. Maverick was a lone wolf. Well,
Yeah.
in the end of the movie, he wasn't a lone wolf. But that you get my point. It's just that, you don't want to be a Maverick. You want to be Iceman.
Great advice.
Us, I guess, yeah. Well, I mean, given the latest Top Gun movie just came out, I don't feel like I'm dated anymore now.
No, not at all. It's refreshing.
And we'll see. I don't know. I don't think it's going to win the Academy Award this year, but we'll see what happens. I can't believe it's on the Academy Award list this year. So awesome. So be Iceman or Ice Woman.
Yeah. Take care of your people. Take care of your teammates.
Either one. Maybe that's why Iceman was a 4-star admiral. And Maverick was an 06 colonel.
I'm sure that's why it was.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You can tell I think about these things, all the time. But, okay. All right. So academics, athletics, leadership, and character. So I think we covered those, not, like super in depth, but enough kind of to get everybody the idea of what those are all about and getting that early start that, we want to emphasize. So we have a major announcement now, don't we?
Yes, we do. We have a huge update for all of our listeners.
Tell me, because this was your idea. This was not my idea. This was your idea. I'm not taking any credit for this, but what is it?
Well, realistically, the reason why we're filming this is because we just noticed a huge gap in education. Folks coming to us and not really understanding what they needed to do in 9th and 10th grade to get ready for service academies. So we are super excited to announce our new course. It's going to be a monthly course, a monthly subscription course, specifically designed for 8th, 9th, and 10th graders who are interested potentially in going into the military as an officer. And it's going to provide them with weekly videos and activities to help just prepare them to succeed during the application cycle. So we're calling it the 9th and 10th grade coaching course for anyone that's interested in the service academies or ROTC scholarships. It's going to give kids a great foundation on just making sure that all 4 of those categories are covered and helping them learn what they have to do now early in the process to be successful, but also kind of re-engaging them every once in a while and keeping them motivated, keeping them on track to be successful for when they do start applying.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I know this was an area that we knew we had to do. And so, as soon as you told me this or you gave this idea, I said, we got to do it. So that means you get to see more videos with both of us talking to you about all sorts of different subjects. So they're like mini videos of like 6 to 7 minutes max, I think. And we just talk about a specific thing, that I think that we think that you should concentrate on. And so I've already done a bunch of these videos and I had a blast doing them. So they're already ready. A lot of them are ready to go right now.
So we cannot wait to see you in the course and talk to you more about getting ready in 9th and 10th grade.
So we're excited about it. And we really hope that if you're in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade and you're interested in ROTC or the Service Academy, that you sign up for this subscription course.
So if you're interested in signing up for this course and you're listening to the podcast, you can go ahead and check out our show notes, and we'll have the link in the show notes for you so you can sign up, and we hope to see you in the course.
Okay, thanks, Trish. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you, sir.
Thanks for listening to the ROTC Scholarship Podcast. If you like what we're doing, please leave a quick review. If you have any questions or want more information about ROTC or our consulting services, please visit our website at rotcconsulting.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.